innovation is risk. And if we look at research is innovation, sports science is innovation. So we do need to maintain a culture or a belief that actually taking risks is okay. Obviously, they've got to be mitigated, they've got to be calculated, etc. If we don't take risks and we don't try something different, then things will never change. So I do think that having that risk as central to our culture or our belief sets, whatever you want to call it, is really important to keep moving forward.
Stafford Murray on the podcast. Mate, I'm delighted to have you on. How are you?
Very good, thanks, Steve. It's well, we saw each other a while ago, but before that, it was about 10 years, wasn't it? So it's great to see you, mate.
Yeah. Hey, look, I'm going to kick you off with a bit of a challenging question for you. What wins, blues guitar or sports science?
Blues guitar, easy peasy.
Is that right?
in a really strange way, and this sounds contrived, but it's not. They're actually quite linked because I think the best guitarists and the best scientists actually play with soul and actually believe in what they're doing, not just technical stuff. So it's quite linked in a really spurious way.
Oh, nice! I like that. Have you
Been working on that for weeks.
You've been interviewing this morning, haven't you? So you've been looking for new recruits. But is that one of your? Do you have like an obscure sort of guitar-based question? If you were a guitar-based tune, who would you be? Like a personality test.
Yeah, and if they don't say Jimi Hendrix or Jimmy Page, then they don't get the job.
Oh, maybe you just pre-qualify. They don't even make the they make the interview if they don't. But that's a big love of yours, isn't it? Tell me about that passion for you, and how you're. That's an outlet. Is it you know the Murray brothers are regularly performing. Tell me about your experience with guitaring and making music.
I mean, it's just great fun, Steve. And I mean, it is an outlet from work because it's so different. And the people that go and watch the gigs, or people that don't come and watch the gigs, they don't care about Olympics. They don't care about cricket. They don't care about high performance sport, which is really nice because the conversation is just completely different. But I will say, from playing gigs, it does teach you to understand an audience and be agile with an audience, and kind of understand the people you're trying to get a message across to. Because playing a wedding compared to a festival, compared to a rough bikers pub, is very different. Which is the same as doing a conference, to speaking to a coach, etc. So I think the skills you learn from generally the bad gigs, the tough ones, I think are skills that transfer into work as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's an obvious thing, isn't it? I guess if you don't turn up and if you've got good energy, if you're not performing on stage in the same way that at an Olympics or a big competition, if you're not in a positive mindset, that's going to have an infected effect on other people, isn't it?
Definitely. And I mean, sometimes, Steve, and you'll know this, sometimes when you go to work or when you're doing a presentation, you do have to put your stage face on, don't you? And sometimes you're not feeling it, and that's probably a good lesson for a lot of aspiring sports scientists. Sometimes you're not feeling it, but you still have to put your game face on. It's when it's time to go, it's time to go.
How do you do that, Staff? How do you have a moment, or do you just have a transition routine? Do you have a sort of a right? We need to do this to get ready. How dialed is that for you in work and on stage?
Yeah, I mean, gigs. It's a real process that I've been doing for years, and basically set up. So you spend an hour setting up the gear. Always make sure you leave yourself at least half an hour to then just go away from the gig. Generally have a beer, to be honest, before a gig, and just get your head in that space before playing a gig, and try to avoid the eggs that are being thrown at you. And it's the same at presenting or talking to. If it's a difficult conversation with a coach or a difficult conversation with a member of staff, I think it's important to actually give yourself that time before and go in prepared. Doesn't matter how much experience you have, I still think it's worth, before you do something like that, perform, whatever that performance might be, I think you need time to actually sit and just breathe and get yourself in the correct mindset.
Has that come from doing that wrong? Has that have you? Is it
Yeah,
a
absolutely.
rushed gig preparation? Is it a haven't got myself sorted the day before, so I'm coming late to the competition, and it's meant that I'm not in my best place, and therefore I can see the audience react differently or the coach react differently.
Yeah, totally. And we used to call it set up sweat. If you're not prepared, if you're not prepared for things to go wrong when you're performing or when you're presenting, when you're talking to coaches, then something will go wrong. You can almost guarantee that. So it doesn't matter how many times you do these things. Just prepare. Expect things not to work. So have a plan B, have a plan C, have a plan D. Scenario test the thing to death. But even now, to be honest, Steve, if I'm doing a presentation, I'll prep it to hell. It won't look like it. It'll look like I'm busking it, but I'm not.
I like that. I don't know whether this was a Churchill quote because a lot of stuff gets attributed to Churchill, but he was saying, "I'm just preparing my witty remarks," which was that sense of actually giving yourself either the stability of your performance so that you can be spontaneous,
That's right.
or that you're giving yourself some of that the spontaneity ahead of time. You've chosen the directions in which you might want to freestyle a bit.
Billy Connolly says, "I do a great ad lib if given 30 minutes notice."
Right, yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. We had Paul Z. Jackson on the podcast recently, and he was talking about kind of improv. And so he teaches improv, and he's helped a lot of really amazing stars to develop their comedy skills, their acting skills. But he said that there's actually an awful lot of process and preparation and rules, sort of, if this, then that, to allow you to be more spontaneous and, I guess, live and in the situation, rather than thinking, I'm just going into an unknown maze. I don't know which direction it's going to go in. You can actually prepare. It sounds like it's a similar thing where you're preparing with structure to allow yourself to respond.
Yeah, and do you remember totally? And do you remember Steve? Oh, blimey! I think it was before, maybe just after Beijing, going into London, or maybe before that. Actually, thinking about it, going into Beijing, maybe. And we were working with our staff to try to enhance the way that we delivered a message, and we brought in a stand-up comedian, and tried
Yeah.
to as you did with your improv, mate, there break down whether there's a process or not. Because I mean, I don't know about you, but I can't. That's got to be the hardest gig in the world, isn't it? Just stand with a microphone and you've got to make these people laugh for an hour. I mean, that's if that's not the best communication skills ever, then what is? So we had this comedian come in, and exactly as you say, whilst it looks like it was ad lib and they responding to shouts from
Mm.
the crowd, actually there's a real formula behind it. That's not to say it's got to be completely formulaic when we're presenting, because you don't want to take that kind of agility out of it and the kind of off the cuff kind of passion and response to it. But I think if you don't prepare to present or to have a conversation, you're starting on a bad foot.
Yeah. Hey, look, we dive straight into it there, but you've seen it all. We sort of started our careers at the same sort of time in the 90s, and if you're looking back at some of the major changes that you've seen in your field, whether it's sports science as a whole, the performance support, or specifically in performance analysis, if you look back and think, oh, there was a big shift there. What would be the things that stand out in your memories?
Yeah, I mean, if I start in my ology, as it were, within performance analysis, the big shift the big shift was, of course, back in the day, shifting from hand notation to actually computerized notation, and then in the 90s, being able to actually capture video onto your computer and therefore link the video to the data, and that tells the whole story, doesn't it? That gives context to the data when you've got the video aligned to it. So that was an early breakthrough in the kind of 90s. And then moving forward, it was the ability to view data and to use video on various platforms. So getting away from it having to be on a television or whatever it may be. So being constrained by the technology. The kind of questions haven't changed because coaches want good data and they want good video. So that's a constant. But the way and the methods and the ability and the availability to how we can do it is changed, which is generally positive. But in some ways, you can almost hide behind tech and not actually get your ducks in a line before you start using the tech. So that's a constant rhetoric of mine, which people must be sick of hearing. That actually you shouldn't be driven by tech. You should be driven by the performance need. But the current exciting thing, obviously there's lots and lots of exciting things happened over the years, but because we've been doing this stuff for 30 odd years now, Steve, me and you alike, we can actually now start talking about big data. Whereas before we were trying to apply big data methodologies on what wasn't really truly big data. So we were kind of constrained by the population size of the data set that we were working with. At the same time, obviously, N=1 is important in performance sport because that's performance sport. But we can actually start now applying proper machine learning, AI techniques on these huge data sets that we've got, showing messages, hidden messages that in the past we just wouldn't been able to see. So it's a really exciting time in the data side of the analysis because of the ability to capture a lot more, for it to be a lot more accurate, for it to be generally more real time. Therefore, we can make better decisions from it. So it's a bloody exciting time to be in PA. Sports science generally, and the same as you, Steve, I went from a kind of within my discipline to then a generic kind of sports science management leadership roles. I mean, it just keeps on growing, doesn't it? It just keeps on getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The thing that I've seen over the years, and I know you have, Steve, is the understanding that coaches have of sports science now and how it's actually how it's actually integral to the process. It's not just an add-on like, I should have a bit of sports science because that's the buzzword. Actually, it's integral to the planning, and it's not just an add-on. So it's a really exciting time for young practitioners to get into sports science.
Let me pick that up then, because that coaches' receptivity to data, to analysis, when to a certain extent, and largely technique, or I've got a coach's eye, has been the lifeblood of excellent coaching, and it will continue to be. But if I remember correctly, and I'm probably going back to when you were presenting your case, the case for performance analysis, and I'm going to try and remember the reference, but there was a data point around, the retrieval of accurate technique from a coach was about 30%. Was that about right?
Yeah, that was
something like that.
So that was the original research in the 80s by Ian Franks and Tim McGarry.
Franks, yeah, I thought it was.
And that was around. It was eyewitness testimony originally.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was the original science behind it. That eyewitnesses basically recalled about between 30 and 40% correctly, and then research was done on the back of that in actual sport. And depending on the level of the coach, and depending on whether you were an athlete or a coach, it was somewhere between 20 and 40% correct recall. So you're losing 60 to 80%, aren't you?
And so I often remember that as creating the case. So that's why you probably need good information and good data. And I can recall vividly some awkward crunch moments where biomechanists, performance analysts were on the sidelines, and a coach was giving out instruction to an athlete to say, this is what you've done, this is what's happened. And you could see the sort of, oh, no, hang on a minute, that didn't happen. My data, my video shows something different. And then it felt like it was that in certain circumstances, there was a combativeness to it in terms of the video and the data have got to agree with me before I let you in on the inner circle.
Yeah.
What's your sense of how this has changed over time? Is there a greater receptivity, greater literacy of coaches being familiar with data?
Yeah, interesting, Stephen. And I mean, I'll say, as you just said, this will never ever replace good coaching. You know, good coaches see, smell, feel things that data and video will never ever show. So this won't replace it, but it can amplify it. It can question it. It can enhance it, etc. There was within the Olympic movement when we first started early 2000s. There was a complete mix, to be honest, Steve, from acceptance to the opposite, where they felt threatened by it, where they felt like this is questioning my experience, etc. And that still happens now. To be honest, Steve, it's not a one size fits all model. There's still coaches in various sports that do like numbers, that don't like numbers, that do like video and don't like video. So yes, it's evolved, but there's still situations where the want to be client doesn't actually want it, or sorry, the client that needs it doesn't actually want it. And that's not where young practitioners should point a finger at the coaches. That's where they should lift up the mirror to themselves and go, right, okay, how am I going to influence this person? Not complain about that person. How do I actually influence them to make sure that they do actually want the numbers or they do want the video? So it has changed, but personalities are still personalities, and you still need to influence.
Yeah. Okay. So you strike at a fundamental there in terms of what are your needs, coach, and let me see if I can provide insights, solutions, actionable data for you. Or the default knee jerk, I think, for a lot of practitioners beyond performance analysis is, I've got a thingy. Let me see if I can use my widget on you. Yeah. Whether it's got performance benefit or not, but it's new and it's novel and it's groundbreaking, and there's new opportunities in this widget land. From my world, it was an awful experience doing VO2 max tests on shot putters. We had a VO2 maxometer, and we just put anyone through it. You don't need that though.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, it's the new shiny thing, isn't it? It's the magpie effect. And all good scientists and all good practitioners, applied practitioners especially, will have that conversation, as you say, or at least have done a needs analysis before they stick something somewhere,
so to speak. Are you still hands-on, staff, or are you coordinating, orchestrating things now?
I wasn't for years, Steve. So did it hands-on for whatever 10, 15 years, and then same as you, led programs within the institute and the Olympic sports for another 10 years, and then moved to New Zealand in a different role. Moved to the New Zealand Olympic setup, and that was not hands-on at all. That was a pure leadership, leading the innovation and the performance support team for 5 years there, which I really enjoyed. But when the opportunity in cricket came, it's a professional sport. It's got a very different rhythm to Olympic and Commonwealth sports, which I found exciting, to be honest with you. It's a professional sport which comes with various different kind of emotions and needs, etc. And to be honest, Steve, I actually wanted to get back closer to coaches and athletes. I did 5 years in the boardroom, enjoyed it, but I missed that kind of. I missed the reason why we got into it in the first place, to be honest, Steve. Which is that excitement of being close to the coach and athlete. So I don't deliver day to day. No, I've got a team. I've got a great team of analysts that deliver day to day. But because you're embedded in such a exciting, fast moving sport, you actually feel like you're close to the action.
Yeah. And so maybe I could ask you a little bit about the demand that you're faced with, the analysts are faced with in a moment. But can I just take uh, a second to ask you about the the differences that you see in a system, whether it's Sports Council originally, Institute system, Britain, another system over in New Zealand, and now professional sports. Is there anything that sort of stands out in terms of big differences or core aspects that you'd go, yeah, that's a common trend wherever you're going?
Yeah, it was fascinating moving to a different Olympic system. Having done 20 years, the same as you, Steve, or 15 years within the GB system, which, if we just start on that, I mean, the way that evolved from late 90s through to kind of London, I guess, and beyond Rio even, and obviously Tokyo and Paris now, the way that's expanded and the impact that that's had has been incredible, absolutely incredible. Whether it's at a size now that's optimal, whether it needs to be bigger or smaller, I don't know. I'm not close enough to it. Um, uh, but there's definitely an optimal size, and I don't know what that size is because I'm not in there.
Right.
Um, and I learned that quite quickly going to the New Zealand system because it's a lot smaller. Obviously smaller because it's a smaller country, but actually, if you look at kind of representation of population size, it's actually smaller. And I think there was a strength in that because
Right.
I think you had to make sure that you were having an impact. You had to make sure that you were being led by the performance question or the coaches or the needs of the sport. So I do think there was a benefit there. The difference that I found in the different country, and this is neither negative or positive, it's just a different, is that there was a lot of value in kind in the system. I think that's because it's a smaller country and everyone feels closer to
Right.
it. But the value in kind from companies, from sports science providers, from universities was absolutely huge. As
Right.
was first, I'd say this one, philanthropic support. Massive support from philanthropists, which was really quite interesting because if you needed some money, you could almost guarantee getting it, providing it was going to
Right.
help the sports. So that was interesting. From a system point of view, I think it's changed now within the UK. But again, I'm not sure because I haven't been in it for a while. But the thing that I found really interesting when I got there was obviously they had funded sports, the same as UK. You have your funded sports, but then there was individual support. So even if the sport wasn't funded, if there was an athlete that was a medal hopeful, they've wrapped a support
Right.
around that individual. I think we do it now in UK, but that was the real difference at the time. That even if the sport isn't performing, if there's one athlete that could be a medalist, let's wrap support around that person. So yeah, and
Interesting.
it was just fascinating, to be honest, Steve, seeing a different system, wearing a different kit. Even that was just
Did you feel
yeah,
naughty?
interesting. Yeah. First of all, I did.
Did
Felt really
you?
naughty.
Did you?
Yeah, I was like kind of like hiding it and stuff. And a couple of the a couple. A couple of the coaches that I work with in the GB system, which I won't name obviously, but they sent quite a few Judas images to me. So it was so it was a good fun. It was
I've got.
a great experience, and I'm not sure. I think everyone should try it. To be honest with you, I think to live, work, play outside of your own system in your own country is a really healthy thing to do.
In that spirit, then I've got a confession to make. I've got, I've got a bit of a confession. I mean, I've been consulting with different institute systems, but they've been quite, go over there, do a talk, eh, make some, do some analysis. That's it.
Yeah.
I've been helping the French system.
Oh wow.
So yeah,
I thought
yeah,
you
and
should.
yeah,
Of course.
merci. That's it.
So it's a lot.
Yeah, but just they knocked on the door and said, "Look, could you help us help prepare for the challenge of the home games? What were your experiences? What were the strengths? What were the things you did well that you think were actually we could potentially replicate? And also, what mistakes did you make? And here's our strategy. What do you think?" And actually, it's been really interesting to not only take time to reflect back, but also recognise that actually globally speaking, it's not a rivalry. It's a case of actually, you know what? Sport is stronger if France has a great games.
Mm. So
The Olympics, which is under threat with enhanced games and doping games, all these sorts of things that might be cropping up. Actually, it wasn't a difficult decision to be part of, and they've been wonderful to work
mm,
with. Really different. My reflection was that a lot of the pre-London focus, it wound a lot of people up. Actually, we had to.
mm,
I don't know what it was like for you, but we ended up having to sort of calm everyone down a little bit
mm.
as the games got closer and that fervor started to increase. And that was a lot of some of my message to them, to say that at this stage, a lot of it's hijacks, people behaviors coming out that really shouldn't be coming out,
Yeah,
and give people clarity and focus, so that you can perform individually, but also that supports athletes to do that.
totally agree. And,
Yeah.
the old kind of the old rhetoric of the home advantage is true if it's done correctly, but it can also be a home disadvantage, can't it?
Yeah.
Because there's pressures, there's etc. that actually we need to make sure that we deal with correctly. But
Yeah.
with regards to you working for the French system, Steve, I mean, I think that's wonderful, and I think if we have a mindset that we think we know best from whatever system we're within, then that system's not going to grow, and you're not going to grow as a practitioner. So I think learning from different systems, different countries is so important, and also from outside of sport as well, Steve. To be honest, there's a lot for us to learn outside of sport that we can bring back into sport. So having that cliche term, the open mindset, I think is absolutely key for us to keep growing. I think back to when we started in the 90s, we were trying all kinds of things, learning from all kinds of sports, all kinds of people. I think the moment that we stop sharing, obviously there's certain IP you can't share. Of course there is. That's obvious. That goes without saying. But I think the moment that we stop sharing amongst or between other countries, other sports, I think that's to the detriment of sport itself. To be honest.
Yeah, and it's not, a lot of the time the devil is in the implementation, isn't it? It's not the knowledge is out there.
Mm,
It's finding ways in which you can land the idea.
yeah.
Um, Whether it's the right time for that idea in terms of the application of innovation.
Mm,
It might not be that, just because they're doing it, we should do it. If
that's
it's
right.
got to be tuned, hasn't it, to the environment?
That was really interesting running the innovation program for 5 years down there, Steve. And I totally agree with that. That obviously it's how the innovation is applied, because innovation without impact is just an idea. So how it's applied, the context, the culture, the environment that it's applied in is absolutely important. And also, that innovation in 12 months' time is going to be norm. So actually, the kind of whether we try and whether we try and stick IP around it so that no one can use it for 5, 6 years, etc. Whether we keep it a secret for a certain amount of time, I think innovation is only kind of impactful once, really. So we need to make sure that we keep moving forwards, which was really interesting, within the New Zealand system, because there's so many people wanting to help from outside of sport.
Right.
So a lot of the work we did down there was around material science. That was a big thing, because a lot of the sports down there are what they traditionally call the sitting down sports, which makes them sound easy, but they're bloody not. Rowing, canoeing, etc. So a lot of material science innovation projects there, which we learn mainly from outside of sport.
Yeah. And how do you help coaches when, because, we collectively, perhaps not individually, but we collectively were sort of authors of the marginal gains approach, which seems to have sort of caught on in the wrong way globally. My feeling, anyway, is that you end up people saying we should do this, do that, do the other, and everyone has to be some expert project manager to
Mm.
keep a grip on 100 different insights and innovations. Have you got a sense of how you help coaches balance big picture, do the basics brilliantly, versus actually, yeah, let's go deep on this.
Yeah, and you just said the same. I was going to say, it's got to be world class basics, isn't it? If the bottom of your pyramid isn't strong and correct, then there's no point sprinkling the fairy dust. Um, so again, probably a good lesson for a young practitioner is get the basics right. Absolutely nail the basics out of the park, and then you can start talking about the fancy innovation stuff, because they don't work without each other.
Yeah. And how do you help coaches with that too?
Yeah,
So
and
that
again,
they've got their head up, but they've got also the eye on the detail.
yeah, I mean, depends on the relationship, doesn't it? Depends on the personality of the coach. Some coaches have got complete faith in you, etc. But I always see it as a process, and the process that we take the coaches through, or took the coaches through, I should say, in when I was leading the innovation program, was very much a kind of performance backwards approach, which I know is a cliche term these days, but it is literally right. Let's look at where we want to get, and then look at how we're going to get there. So that was very much embedded in the innovation process. Bringing a coach on board. Some coaches, as I said, say, right, this is what I want. Complete faith in the process. You go and sort it. Others want to be part of the process and want to be part of the iterative process of creating the innovation. Both have got strengths and weaknesses, and again, that's why we need to be agile as practitioners to adapt to the different environments that we chucked in with coaches. Um,
Yeah.
but it was an interesting process, Steve, to look at running the innovation program, because it is risk, isn't it? Innovation is risk, you know. And if we look at research is innovation, sports science is innovation. So we do need to maintain a culture or a belief that actually taking risks is okay. Obviously, they've got to be mitigated, they've got to be calculated, etc. All of the words that are attached to it. But if we don't take risks and we don't try something different, then things will never change. So I do think that having that risk as central to our culture or our belief sets, whatever you want to call it, is really important to keep moving forward.
And how have you got a sense of some of the best ways in which people can start to explore risk? I mean, my sense is that actually the doing the basics brilliantly is where you're going, actually, let's nail the low risk, high reward things.
Mm.
But the higher risk, higher reward, have you got a sense of how that's best introduced?
Yeah, that's a $1 million question, Stephen. When we're putting in the high risk changes, that's really hard, and that's been a kind of question of mine when going into sports all of the time. And it's often the case that if you're going for a high risk, high reward intervention or change, sometimes the sport have got to be willing to take a step back as well. It might not implement a positive change immediately. So that's where conversations, relationships, honesty between us and the sport is absolutely vital to get to that stage that, this risk firstly might not work. Secondly, it actually might push you back a little bit, but long term it will help. So that's the art of innovation, isn't it? And that's why innovation is not a science. It's an art and a science blend, isn't it?
Does it still require analysts to know the basics, to know what's going on in that sense of, again, another maybe obvious example or comparison would have been when we went, shift from Douglas bags to breath by breath.
Mm.
And there was this sort of pushback from the purists of, "Whoa, we don't know whether that's right, or it's all gone into a black box."
Mm.
Is there still a requirement to, without sounding too stereotypical, be an Excel whiz and be able to scrutinize and review the data so you can assure, you can problem solve, you can error spot? Is that still a requirement, do you think, in the future, or is it actually just so good now that it's just, you don't have to worry about that?
Depends which party you're in, doesn't it? I'm in the party of, actually, I still think it's good for our analysts to know where this data comes from, and how it's kind of come to where it is. So the kind of process of building to the answer, I think that's really, really important, because again, you understand the situation. But there'll be a party in the future that actually say, you know what, trust the AI, and go with it. Obviously, when we're using AI models now, our data science team are absolutely fantastic, bloody brilliant. We still compare the models, or the AI driven models, against human created models. So we are still testing the reliability and validity of the AI models. But like I say, in the future, and as you asked, will that need go away? I don't know, but you'd probably presume so, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I don't know. And is it something you have to devote a lot of time to sort of reading the waves to see what where's the weather going on this? Is that something you have to develop your policy and your thinking about the future trends that are emerging?
Yeah, and funny enough, that's very topical, Steve. So we've got an internal data science team of four people, and we're just developing a new data science strategy, for want of a better word, and part of that is futurology. You know, where are we actually going with this? What are the opportunities, but also what are the risks? And we don't want to lose the stuff that we're doing well, but we don't want to miss what we could do to enhance it. So our strategy is very much here and now, what we need to deliver, but also a futurologist approach to what could it look like in 10, 15 years time.
Interesting. Now you set up the data analysis systems out of numerous Olympic Games for the British system, didn't you? I presume you did that for the Kiwis too. Is that something that what's your sense of how you select a team to be able to perform under pressure? Because this is sort of the initial setup and the cables and the rooms and the hubs back home. But when you're looking for people who are able to perform under the spotlight or the crunch, how do you respond first? And then what are the things that you look to try and help people to develop their skills in?
Yeah, bloody great question, mate. Yeah, so we did the centralised, as you know, the centralised kind of Olympic Team GB capture for London, Rio, and then Julia Wells took over Tokyo and Paris. And an old friend of ours, Simon Briscoe, runs the New Zealand setup.
Right.
And I think to function and have the ability to be impactful within that environment is quite novel, isn't it? You know, you know what the situation's like. It's very exciting. It's very motivating, but it's at times anxious. Of course, it is.
Yeah.
So we actually recruited. We had a baseline of these are the technical skills you need or the qualifications you need, and then we actually tested their ability to perform under pressure in a tight environment, really. So that was the philosophy, that minimum benchmark technical qualifications, that's almost quite easy to measure.
Yeah.
And then we start to measure how you perform under pressure, which is quite hard because an interview doesn't really show that. Obviously we looked at experience, we looked at where they currently work in, the kind of environment that they currently work within, the people that they currently work with, which obviously tells a story. But I think for us as a sports science kind of community, how we better test the ability to work in those environments at a recruitment stage, I still think is something that I know we do pressure testing, and we do try to test that during recruitment, but I don't think we've nailed that at all yet, personally.
Oh, interesting. I got a few ideas on that. Maybe we pick
There
that
you go,
up.
brilliant. Oh, bloody great.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
It's there's some recent article on BBC about Bournemouth analysts having to process over from a Wednesday through to a Saturday morning, and that the pressure on them to produce, long hours. Also, too, that these certainly pro games will not finish until late, and so there's a commitment there. But there's also the heat of the competition, the importance that tends to can affect your performance, doesn't it? To deliver, but also to behave, to kind of add value to the environment. What are your reflections of what's gone well for you when you're in the heat of it at an Olympics?
I've learned, to be honest, Steve, I've learned from making thousands of mistakes over the years, to be honest. And I don't think we can learn without making mistakes. But the biggest lesson that I've learned in those environments when it's high pressure is know when to say nothing. And often saying nothing is more important than saying the wrong thing. So that's my big thing when it's a really intense, stressful kind of stressful environment. Is knowing when to. It's a horrible phrase, but knowing when to shut up. To be honest,
Yeah. I think
literally,
there's wisdom in that. Just stepping back. Yeah,
step back.
you're a support system, aren't you?
Yeah.
Get at the back.
What if I do nothing?
Don't be
What if I do
noisy.
nothing? You know?
Yeah,
Yeah. Which because you want to make a difference and because
yeah.
you're dying to get in there and you really want to blimmin' say so, but actually, I'll probably read the room again. Nah, zip, nothing. Thank you.
Yeah, and coming back to some of our initial thoughts, I think actually that really helps a practitioner if you prepare for that and you choose your stress-based response before you go into that environment. When it starts to get heated, this is the sort of persona or the mantra I need to have in my head,
Yeah.
rather than a rash behaviour that is perhaps just too spontaneous or reactive or fight and flight.
Totally, mate. And that's why I've always really thought like scenario testing is really important. What if scenario testing? And if
Yeah,
you what if, right, this situation has gone completely chaos. The coach is blowing his or her lid here. He's absolutely given the players blooming hairdryer treatment, and he's that test that situation. And if you want to become good at a sport, you'd practice, or you'd mentally rehearse, or you'd try something. Same as being in a situation. You got to think about it before, and you've got a what if plan. And exactly as you say, you should have a response for each scenario.
yeah. Interesting. Well, what's still to come? What was your hopes for the discipline? Where do you want it to go? What's the sort of if you were to think about the rocking chair moment, you look back over your career
Not far,
and
mate.
hope no for it to for you to be thinking, it's now really advanced beyond me. What are your hopes for the area of performance analysis?
Yeah, there's three things, and it sounds like I've been on too many management courses with the rule of three, but there are. One is I really don't want to see analysts coding and capturing data. That's not analysis. That's just pressing buttons. So my dream is that AI or some other automated process, whatever that may be, will actually enable our analysts to be insights lead, basically insights leads. So that's my kind of vision. That's my kind of vision there. The second vision is around actually really informing decision making. So if we're really honest and we watch the telly or the football on the telly, or are we actually making a massive difference at the very very top end? So that's a cultural shift that's really moved, and we are making a difference. But I still think it can go further. Again, we're never going to replace coaches, but how can we influence the coaching decision more? And then the third one, to be honest, Steve, is you've been around and you've seen practitioners come through, etc. But I still would love to see practitioners understand and see the value of a non-siloed approach, because I still do think that some practitioners in my discipline and in others' disciplines, their sports science in a silo, and I know that's an age old dream of us all, but I still think that we can work better as disciplines. So how do we actually know that we're going to inform decision making at the very very top end? Our analysts are not pressing buttons, they're actually making difference, and they're actually creating insights. And we work as a truly, we've talked about multidisciplinary teams and interdisciplinary teams since God was a lad, haven't we? But actually get to that truly where we're having an impact.
Oh, wow. Well, they sound like they can actually complement each other. If you're not coding,
Yeah,
pressing buttons as much, maybe you've got a bit more capacity
you can
or
actually talk.
freedom to get out and talk to the physiotherapist. What are they seeing? What they're hearing? What's the chatter?
Exactly. Yeah.
What's the insight that can round out and mature your thinking and your insights, so that you're able to better inform decisions that can have an impact there.
Totally. And I
Love
mean, the
that.
one thing to add on to the three, so the rule of four, is I just hope that, and I'm sure that they will. I just hope that young scientists, young practitioners, still bloody enjoy it and still have fun, because we're in a privileged situation, and it's fun. We're working in sport, so yeah, it's serious. Of course, it's serious, and the ramifications of losses and wins are extremely serious. But I just hope that we carry on enjoying it.
Yeah, lovely. Hey, that's a great note
Cool.
to wrap up on. Actually, yeah, enjoy it. You go and watch sport to enjoy it, don't you? The thrill
Yeah,
of it.
yeah.
And sometimes these environments can get so wound up and serious that you end up
Lose
killing
that.
it.
You lose that. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Hey, look, great to chat to you, fella. I really
Oh, pleasure.
appreciate you spending some time and hearing your wisdom and your thoughts on how they've developed since our last proper, real, meaningful conversations. And and it's appropriate for me to give you a big pat on the back and kudos to how you fathered the whole area, been part of the team that have really pioneered its development from those funny old days with a clipboard and ticking boxes, all the way through to embracing innovation, growing whole discipline teams, and and marshalling it in for the future. So credit to you, fella.
Oh, that's lovely, Steve. And I mean, I look with extreme pride of the guys that we used to work with, Mike Hughes, Chris White, um, Duncan Locke, who are now leaders in the world in this industry, across not just Olympic, across all sports, and look back to our kind of mentor, Mike Hughes Senior, and various other people at that time. And I know you've got people like that within physiology. It's just fascinating to see where it's come from when they started 40, 50 years ago, when it was almost just a dream. It was just a kind of
Yeah,
opinion of theirs, where now it's fundamentally embedded in what all athletes do around the world. It's just great to be part of it, really, isn't it?
yeah, incredible. So thanks so much.
Pleasure. Thanks, Stephen. Good luck.